James Mitchell's voice sliced through the marble lobby like breaking glass as he barked into his headset, "I don't care how you do it, get her out of sight right now." Every guest within earshot turned, startled, but James wasn't looking at them. His sharp blue eyes were locked on Maya Carter, the black housekeeper crouched quietly beside a column, polishing brass fixtures like she'd done 100 times before. She froze mid-motion, her gloved hand gripping the cloth tighter as James strode toward her, his leather shoes clicking hard against the stone floor. "This is the Meridian Grand Hotel," he hissed under his breath, leaning close enough for her to feel the heat of his words, "and today, one wrong move could cost us $600 million. Do you understand me? Stay invisible." Maya nodded faintly, her throat tight, but before she could respond, Victoria Langford, the hotel's operations director, appeared at James's side like a shadow. "Frankly, James," she said smoothly, casting Maya a dismissive glance, "guests from Chen Holdings are arriving any minute. Do you really want them seeing housekeepers in the lobby?" Her words weren't just a suggestion, they were a calculated strike, sharp enough to cut dignity to pieces. But Maya said nothing. She swallowed the sting and lowered her gaze, rolling her cart toward the service hallway, just as a convoy of black Mercedes SUVs pulled up outside. "Before I take you inside what happened next, where a single choice changed careers, rewrote futures, and flipped the power in this hotel upside down, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit like right now. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every second of this." The automatic glass doors slid open with a soft hiss as Wei Chen, the Chinese billionaire whose $600 million investment could decide the hotel's future, stepped into the lobby. He was a compact man in his late 50s, silver hair swept back neatly, his posture radiating quiet authority. His entourage followed close behind, 3 aides carrying sleek leather portfolios, 2 security men scanning the space with sharp precision. James straightened his tie, forcing a confident smile as he hurried forward to greet them, while Victoria smoothed her navy blazer, ready to take control. "Mr. Chen, welcome to the Meridian Grand," James said, his voice overly bright, reaching for the translation app on his phone. Chen nodded politely, responding in rapid Mandarin. The app buzzed, processed, and then blurted out nonsense through the speaker, "The flour tax for your shrimp bicycle is unprepared." Silence hung in the air. Chen frowned. His aides exchanged puzzled glances. Victoria's jaw tightened. James swallowed hard and tried again. "Mr. Chen, we are honored to host you and confident we can provide the accommodations you require," he said slowly, hoping his English would land. Chen answered again in Mandarin, this time more firmly. The app stuttered, hesitated, then spat, "Your dragon insurance collapses tomorrow." The aide suppressed laughter. One whispered something in Mandarin Maya understood instantly, "This hotel lacks cultural depth." Maya froze mid-step, her cart still parked in the shadows near the service door. She had heard every word. After years studying at Tsinghua University, perfecting her Mandarin, Cantonese, and Japanese, she didn't need a translation app to understand how close this deal was to falling apart. She also knew James didn't understand a thing Chen was actually saying. "Pathetic," one aide muttered softly, shaking his head. Maya's heart pounded, but she stayed rooted in place, hands gripping the cart handle, her mind caught between fear and frustration. Elena Ruiz, the young front desk supervisor, noticed her hesitation and stepped over, lowering her voice. "You understand them, don't you?" she whispered. Maya blinked, startled, but nodded faintly. Elena squeezed her wrist, eyes urgent. "Then you have to speak up, Maya. If this deal dies, they'll blame everyone, especially you." But speaking up was dangerous. 3 years ago, Maya had landed this job after more than 400 rejections, applications ignored, interviews dismissed, dreams shelved because no one believed someone like her belonged in corporate hospitality. She had a Georgetown degree in international business, a master's in Asian studies from Tsinghua University, and more cultural fluency than anyone in the room. And yet, here she was, polishing brass fixtures, invisible by design. Every month, her student loan reminder arrived like clockwork, $120,000 owed, 3 months behind, interest climbing. She couldn't risk losing this job. Not now. Not when her entire future still hung by a thread. In the middle of the lobby, Victoria leaned close to James, her voice dripping with quiet venom. "This is embarrassing," she murmured. "Chen's going to walk. And when he does, the board's going to ask why we weren't prepared. I told you we needed a professional translator." James clenched his jaw, sweat already gathering at his temple. "The app should have been enough," he muttered. "This is supposed to be simple." Victoria's smirk deepened. She loved watching him sweat. If this deal collapsed, she'd slide into his job without resistance. And James knew it. Chen glanced at his watch, impatience flashing in his expression. "Miami zoning ordinances," he said sharply in Mandarin, his tone clipped. "Tax abatements for cultural exchange programs. Where is this information?" James froze, staring blankly at the phone screen, waiting for the app to translate. But Maya already knew what he was asking, and she also knew the answer. The city council had just updated zoning laws last quarter, permitting 50-story mixed-use developments, plus a 15% tax break for cultural initiatives. She'd read it in Mandarin the night before while reviewing a business journal during her lunch break. Every detail was right there, in her head, ready to speak. And still, she stayed silent. Because Victoria was watching her. Maya could feel it, those cold, calculating eyes slicing through her like glass, waiting for the smallest misstep to destroy her. Victoria had humiliated her once before. A year ago, Maya had assisted a Japanese guest struggling with check-in, answering a question fluently in his native language. Instead of thanking her, Victoria had cornered her in the hallway afterward, seething with controlled rage. "Guests don't want maids acting educated," she'd whispered, her manicured nails grazing Maya's name tag. "Stay in your lane, or I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Now, with Wei Chen watching, with cameras flashing, and with $600 million on the line, Victoria's warning echoed louder than ever. Chen sighed, setting his leather briefcase down gently on the marble floor. "This hotel is unprepared," he said quietly, in Mandarin, but the disappointment in his voice carried like thunder. He motioned to his aides. "We should leave." The word slammed into Maya like a wave. If he walked out now, James would lose his job, Victoria would rise to power, and Maya would still be invisible, still polishing fixtures, still paying debts until she had nothing left but exhaustion. Elena caught her eye from across the room, her expression sharp, almost pleading. "Say something," it begged. "Say it now." Maya's breath caught. Her palms were damp. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. This was her chance. And if she spoke, nothing would ever be the same again. Maya stood frozen behind her cart, the hum of the Meridian Grand's marble lobby fading beneath the pounding in her ears. Wei Chen's soft, clipped words still hung in the air like a silent verdict: "This hotel is unprepared," and James Mitchell's nervous smile had begun to crack, revealing the panic beneath his polished exterior. Victoria Langford, standing just behind him, looked like a shark circling blood in the water, her arms folded, nails tapping rhythmically against her tablet as if counting down the seconds until the inevitable collapse. Chen's aides whispered rapidly in Mandarin, their words sharp and impatient, and though no one else in the room seemed to understand, Maya caught every syllable. "This place is a joke. We should leave now." The weight of those words crushed her chest like a vice. She tightened her grip on the cart's handle until her knuckles burned, knowing she held the key to turning this entire disaster around, and yet fear kept her rooted in place. Across the lobby, Elena Ruiz stepped closer, her warm brown eyes locking on Maya with quiet urgency. She leaned against the reception desk, pretending to check a guest ledger, and mouthed, "Speak up." Maya shook her head almost imperceptibly, her throat dry, but Elena didn't back down. Instead, She scribbled a quick note on a folded piece of paper and slid it onto the polished mahogany counter where only Maya could see. "You can fix this. Don't let Victoria win." The words hit her harder than she expected, slicing through years of swallowed pride and silent endurance. Maya's heart thudded, her chest rising and falling faster now, and for the briefest moment, she imagined herself stepping forward, imagined Wei Chen's eyes turning toward her, imagined speaking Mandarin with the effortless fluency she had spent years perfecting at Tsinghua University. She imagined proving everyone wrong. But then she felt Victoria's stare. Cold. Unrelenting. It dragged her back into memory, 3 years earlier, standing in a cramped service corridor as Victoria's manicured hand gripped her shoulder, the whispered warning still burning like acid. "Guests don't want maids acting educated, Maya. Stay in your lane." Back then, Maya had obeyed. Back then, she couldn't afford to fight. She still couldn't. Her phone buzzed faintly in her apron pocket, and she knew without looking what it was. Another overdue notice, another reminder that the $120,000 in student loans wasn't going to pay itself, not when every opportunity she deserved had been locked behind silent doors. She'd been rejected more than 400 times before settling for this job, and if she lost it, she had nothing left. James cleared his throat, desperate to regain control, and gestured toward his phone as though confidence could be faked. "Mr. Chen," he said slowly, "we are committed to making this partnership succeed." Chen raised one eyebrow, unimpressed, and spoke again in Mandarin, his tone sharper now. "What is the city's position on cultural exchange incentives for investors? Have your executives even studied the zoning laws?" The translation app stuttered, then sputtered nonsense. "Your shrimp bicycle permits flower insurance." Chen's aide snickered openly this time, their professionalism cracking under the absurdity, and Victoria winced, turning slightly away as though she weren't attached to this sinking ship. James's face flushed crimson. He glanced at her, expecting assistance, but she merely tilted her chin toward him and whispered, "You insisted we didn't need a translator. Fix it." For a moment, James looked genuinely lost. Sweat darkened the collar of his crisp white shirt, and his perfectly combed hair had begun to stick at the temples. He tried to respond in halting English, gesturing awkwardly toward a projected slide about revenue streams, but Chen cut him off with a raised hand, his voice low but firm. "I came here prepared," he said in Mandarin, "but it seems your hotel did not." He closed his leather folder deliberately, a quiet act that carried the weight of finality. Maya's stomach clenched. If Chen walked out now, the Meridian would lose not only the $600 million investment but its reputation in the entire Asian luxury market. The board would tear James apart. Victoria would ascend to power. And every multilingual, degree-holding staff member hidden away in housekeeping uniforms would continue to be invisible, dismissed without a second glance. Her chest ached with the truth of it, with the exhaustion of carrying her silence like a shield. And yet, the fear of speaking still pinned her down. "Maya." Elena's whisper cut through the chaos like lightning, soft but commanding. "He's about to leave. If you don't say something now, we all lose." Victoria noticed the glance between them and turned sharply, her voice like ice. "Don't even think about it," she hissed, just loud enough for Maya to hear. "If you open your mouth, I will personally make sure you regret it." Something in Maya broke then. Not loudly. Not all at once. But deep inside, where resentment and hope had been silently warring for years, something shifted. Chen's words echoed in her head, "This hotel is unprepared," and for the first time, she realized the truth, she didn't have to accept invisibility anymore. Before she could second-guess herself, before fear could swallow her whole, Maya stepped forward. The sound of her soft-soled shoes against the marble floor seemed deafening in the sudden hush that followed. James turned, confused. Victoria's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Chen looked up, brows furrowing as he studied the housekeeper daring to interrupt one of the highest-stakes negotiations of the year. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, hiding a small gasp. Maya swallowed hard, clasping her hands in front of her apron to hide the tremor, and spoke clearly, steadily, in perfect Mandarin. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice warm yet precise, "Miami recently updated its zoning ordinances to allow 50-story mixed-use developments. The City Council also approved a 15% tax abatement for cultural exchange programs this quarter. I believe these incentives directly address your concerns." Silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of Chen's aides blinked rapidly and murmured, "She speaks Chinese?" Chen tilted his head, intrigue flickering in his sharp, discerning eyes. He responded in Mandarin, testing her fluency with a deliberately complex question involving Pudong's development models and projected returns for multigenerational accommodations. Maya didn't hesitate. Her reply flowed effortlessly, drawing comparisons between Miami's cultural tax incentives and Shanghai's Pudong reforms, even citing updated Q3 data she'd read in a Mandarin business journal the night before. Her words carried confidence, but her heartbeat thundered beneath the surface, each syllable a leap off a cliff she could no longer climb back from. Chen listened, his expression shifting from curiosity to something sharper, respect. He leaned back slightly, nodding as if reassessing not just Maya but the entire Meridian Grand Hotel in the span of a single breath. Victoria, meanwhile, went pale. "James," she whispered, panic creeping into her carefully controlled voice, "she's going to embarrass us." But James didn't respond. For the first time all morning, he wasn't looking at Victoria. He wasn't looking at the translation app. He was looking at Maya, the housekeeper he dismissed not 15 minutes earlier, and realizing she might be the only thing standing between him and catastrophic failure. Maya continued, addressing Chen's concerns about Chinese traveler preferences, switching seamlessly between Mandarin and English as she explained the importance of tea lounges, Alipay integration, and multi-generational suites. Chen's aides exchanged surprised glances, whispering to one another, their tone softer now, their skepticism dissolving. Chen leaned forward, folding his hands on the polished conference table, and for the first time since his arrival, a faint smile touched the edges of his lips. Victoria clenched her tablet so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her carefully constructed image of control, her strategy of quiet sabotage, all of it was unraveling right before her eyes. If Maya succeeded here, Victoria's power would fracture. And she knew it. But Maya didn't look at her. She looked at Chen. And in Chen's measured nod, she saw the possibility of everything she'd been denied for years, acknowledgement, respect, a chance to finally step out of the shadows she'd been forced into. The balance of power in the room shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. And everyone felt it. For a moment, no one in the conference room moved, as if time itself had stalled between one breath and the next. Maya Carter stood at the far end of the polished mahogany table, hands clasped loosely in front of her apron, her voice still hanging in the charged silence like a steady note after a symphony's crescendo. James Mitchell stared at her blankly, his mouth slightly open, his perfectly prepared presentation abandoned, useless now in the face of the housekeeper who had just dismantled 3 weeks of planning with a single sentence. Across the room, Victoria Langford's carefully painted smile faltered, her fingers digging into the edge of her tablet hard enough to leave faint crescent marks, but she quickly recovered, twisting her expression into something sweet, practiced, and venomous. "This is highly irregular," she said sharply, her voice slicing across the air. "Mr. Chen, we apologize for the confusion, but I assure you, we have certified experts prepared to handle your questions. Maya is not part of the Meridian's executive team." She spat the word Maya like it was a blemish she wanted erased from the hotel's record. Chen ignored her completely. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table, his gaze locked on Maya with quiet intensity. He asked softly in Mandarin, "What is your name?" Maya hesitated for the briefest moment, her pulse roaring in her ears, then answered clearly, "Carter, Maya Carter." Her accent was flawless, her tone respectful but steady. One of Chen's aides scribbled her name down immediately, whispering to another in surprise. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her composure cracking beneath the weight of being ignored. James, meanwhile, looked between Chen and Maya like someone watching a chess match he didn't know how to play, his authority evaporating by the second. Chen nodded thoughtfully and continued in Mandarin, testing her knowledge with precision. Tell me, Ms. Carter, what is Miami's projected tourism growth for high-net-worth travelers from China over the next 3 years? And how does your hotel plan to capture this market? The question was designed to unsettle, but Maya didn't falter. Without missing a beat, she replied, citing Miami's latest 2024 Tourism Board reports, referencing exact percentages, and explaining how Mandarin-speaking travelers were expected to increase by 27%, representing an estimated $480 million in annual spending. Then, switching seamlessly into English so everyone else could follow, she added, integrating cultural touchpoints such as dedicated tea lounges, WeChat Pay, and curated Chinese cuisine would position Meridian as a first-choice destination for affluent Chinese travelers. A ripple of murmurs moved through Chen's team. One aide glanced up, nodding slowly, visibly impressed. Chen's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but the kind of subtle acknowledgement reserved for someone who just exceeded expectations. Victoria, sensing her control slipping like sand through her fingers, cut in with a sudden laugh that rang hollow. That's cute, she said tightly, turning to James for support. I suppose we're letting the housekeeping staff run strategic planning now? This is absurd. Maya didn't look at her. Instead, she turned back to Chen, steady and unflinching, and continued answering follow-up questions on zoning ordinances, tax abatements, and Chinese consumer behavior, switching effortlessly between Mandarin and English. The more she spoke, the clearer it became to everyone in the room, this wasn't luck, and it wasn't guesswork. This was expertise. James shifted in his seat, trying to regain composure, his voice cracking slightly as he interjected, yes, well, as Maya just outlined, our leadership team has been exploring similar strategies. Chen's sharp gaze flicked briefly to James, unimpressed, before returning to Maya as though he were quietly recalibrating his entire understanding of the Meridian Grand's hierarchy. Elena Ruiz, watching from the doorway, could barely contain the grin threatening to break across her face. She caught Maya's eye and gave the smallest, subtlest nod of encouragement, silently telling her to keep going, to lean into the moment that was finally, hers. But Victoria wasn't about to surrender quietly. She straightened abruptly, pushing her chair back with a sharp screech, and stood, her heels clicking across the marble floor as she moved closer to Chen's side of the table. Mr. Chen, she began smoothly, her voice honeyed but tight, while we appreciate Maya's enthusiasm, I must clarify that she has no authority to speak on behalf of this hotel. And without proper credentials, I can't verify her data or her claims. We wouldn't want to mislead you. Chen's expression hardened slightly at that, his dark eyes narrowing just enough to make Victoria hesitate mid-step. He shifted his gaze deliberately back to Maya and said, in flawless English this time, and yet, Ms. Langford, she is the only one in this room who has answered my questions. The weight of his words landed like a hammer, reverberating through the silent conference room. Victoria's face flushed deep crimson, but she recovered quickly, forcing a brittle laugh. Well, she said, glancing at James, perhaps we should take a short break. Give everyone a chance to regroup. James hesitated, caught between maintaining protocol and surrendering to the new reality unfolding before him. He started to nod, but Chen raised a hand calmly, silencing the room. No, he said evenly. We continue. The next 30 minutes unfolded like nothing Maya had ever experienced. Chen tested her relentlessly, switching between economic models, cross-market comparisons, and regulatory policies in rapid-fire Mandarin. Maya met him at every step, her voice steady, her confidence growing with each answer she delivered. At one point, Chen's aides abandoned their initial skepticism entirely, leaning in, taking notes, and nodding along. James remained silent, completely sidelined. Victoria, however, simmered quietly in her seat, her tablet clutched so tightly her knuckles blanched white, her jaw flexing every time Chen addressed Maya instead of her. But it wasn't just Chen's questions that made Maya's heart race. It was the realization, with every passing moment, that she belonged here. Every late-night study session in Beijing. Every rejection letter. Every bruise to her pride polishing fixtures in a hotel that never saw her. They had all led to this room, this table, this chance to finally prove what she'd known all along. Her voice mattered. When the questioning slowed, Chen sat back in his chair, folding his hands loosely in his lap. He studied Maya for a long, quiet moment, his gaze steady, almost unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he said in Mandarin, "Tell me why you are here, Ms. Carter. With your education and your fluency, why are you cleaning floors instead of running strategy?" The question sliced deeper than she expected, and for a second, Maya felt the weight of every compromise she'd made pressing down on her chest. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself before she answered softly, "Because no one saw me, Mr. Chen. Until today." A silence fell over the room so profound it felt like the air itself had stilled. Chen's expression didn't change, but there was something new in his eyes, a flicker of understanding, of recognition. He gave a single, deliberate nod. Then he closed his leather folder and said, "I will stay." James nearly collapsed with relief, exhaling a shaky breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Elena grinned openly now, pride shining in her eyes. But Victoria's face. Victoria's carefully curated expression cracked like porcelain under pressure, her lips tightening as she struggled to hide the fury boiling beneath her skin. Chen turned to her smoothly, his tone neutral but cutting. "Ms. Langford, you may prepare a full proposal for my review by next week," he said, "but I expect Ms. Carter to lead the cultural strategy for this project." The words detonated like fireworks in the silent conference room. Victoria's jaw slackened, her breath catching in her throat, but before she could protest, Chen stood, ending the discussion. He extended his hand toward Maya, his expression calm but resolute. "You have earned my respect," he said simply, before leaving the room with his entourage in tow. When the door shut behind him, silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was charged. Unstable. Victoria's eyes burned into Maya like knives. And everyone in the room knew this wasn't over. The conference room door clicked shut, sealing the air into an almost unbearable silence, and for the first time all day, Maya Carter felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room settle squarely on her. Her heart was still hammering, her breath shallow, but beneath the adrenaline, something else pulsed quietly inside her chest, a strange, cautious steadiness she hadn't felt in years. James Mitchell sat slumped in his chair at the head of the table, his usually impeccable composure cracked, his gaze darting between Maya and the closed door as if struggling to process what had just happened. Chen's decision still echoed in his mind like a thunderclap, "Ms. Carter will lead the cultural strategy." He straightened suddenly, loosening his tie as though trying to regain control, and cleared his throat. "Well," he said hoarsely, his voice not quite steady, "congratulations, Maya. You surprised us all today." The words sounded forced, as though dragged out of him, but for James, they were a small surrender, an acknowledgement that the power dynamics inside the Meridian Grand had shifted permanently. Across the table, Victoria Langford hadn't moved. Her fingers dug into the sleek leather of her tablet, nails pressing half-moons into its surface, her entire body held rigid with fury disguised beneath a thin veneer of composure. When she finally stood, the scrape of her chair against the marble floor made everyone flinch. "Surprised us," she repeated softly, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "James, you let a housekeeper hijack a multi-million-dollar negotiation. You let her undermine years of positioning and preparation. And you think this is a victory?" Her voice rose with each word, quiet restraint dissolving into barely controlled venom, but James didn't answer. He looked exhausted, defeated even, the weight of his earlier choices dragging his shoulders down. Victoria turned her fury onto Maya, her gaze cold, calculated, and unblinking. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, she said smoothly, lowering her voice so only Maya and Elena could hear. Because when Chen leaves, I'll make sure everyone remembers exactly who you are. Elena, standing near the door, stiffened instantly, stepping forward protectively, but Maya raised one hand subtly, stopping her. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink back. Instead, she met Victoria's gaze directly, her quiet steadiness more defiant than shouting ever could be. That silent exchange stretched for a breath too long before Victoria finally turned on her heel and swept out of the room, her heel striking the marble like gavel blows. For a moment, no one spoke. Then James inhaled deeply, adjusting his cufflinks as though trying to reassemble some shred of authority. Maya, he said, his tone finally softening, Mr. Chen was impressed. I was impressed. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then added, you saved us today. I won't forget that. The words might have sounded like praise, but Maya heard the unspoken undertone beneath them, gratitude tangled with something heavier, something wary. Because while James respected what she had done, he also understood the implications. The Meridian's hierarchy had shifted, and nothing about this balance of power could be undone. Before Maya could respond, Elena spoke up, her voice warm and certain. She didn't just save you, James. She saved the Meridian. And frankly, it's about time someone noticed what she's capable of. Maya shot Elena a small, grateful glance, but before James could reply, his phone buzzed sharply on the table, the vibration rattling against the glass. He glanced at the screen, paled, and muttered, Chen's office wants an immediate follow-up. Without another word, he left the room, moving quickly, his entire posture shifting into damage control mode. When the door closed again, Maya finally allowed herself to exhale slowly, sinking into the nearest chair as if her legs could no longer carry her weight. Elena knelt beside her, gripping her hand tightly. You were brilliant, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly with pride. Maya, do you understand what you just did? You changed everything. Maya shook her head faintly, staring down at her hands, her voice quiet and steady. I don't know if I changed anything, she murmured, but I couldn't stay invisible anymore. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. One of Chen's aides stepped in, a tall, sharp-featured man with wire-rimmed glasses and a crisp black suit. Mr. Chen requests to speak with Ms. Carter privately, he said smoothly, his Mandarin accent soft but deliberate. Maya froze, glancing instinctively at Elena, who gave her a small nod of encouragement, then rose on slightly shaky legs and followed the aide down the long hallway toward the penthouse-level meeting suite. Inside, Wei Chen stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out over Miami's glittering skyline. The room was quiet except for the muted hum of distant traffic and the faint whisper of the ocean beyond South Beach. When he turned, his expression was calm, unreadable, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. Ms. Carter, he said softly, gesturing for her to sit. She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap, waiting, her heart hammering. After a long pause, he spoke in Mandarin, his tone measured. You carry yourself differently than the rest of your team. You understand our culture, our priorities, our values. That is rare here. Maya swallowed hard, unsure how to respond, but Chen continued before she could speak. I want you to lead Meridian's cultural strategy, yes, he said, but I also have a personal request. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. I am expanding Wei Global's U.S. operations. We will need a director to oversee partnerships, someone fluent, someone competent, someone I can trust. I believe that person is you. The word struck her like a shockwave. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her mind flooded with 1,000 images, late nights in Beijing libraries, endless job rejections, the quiet humiliation of polishing fixtures while hiding her degree beneath a uniform. Now, here was a billionaire offering her a position she had dreamed of for years, a chance to step fully into the life she had fought so hard to build. But before she could answer, the door burst open. Victoria Langford strode in without knocking, her composure perfectly rehearsed but her fury barely masked. "Mr. Chen," she began smoothly, "I need to clarify some details regarding the partnership agreements before they're finalized." "Maya," she added pointedly, her voice dropping like a blade, "this discussion doesn't concern you." Chen turned slowly, his calm expression freezing her mid-step. "Ms. Langford," he said evenly, "everything from this point forward concerns Ms. Carter." Late nights blurred into early mornings as she pored over Mandarin language contracts, zoning regulations, and market forecasts, her desk scattered with research and meticulously annotated notes. Elena stayed with her most evenings, bringing coffee and quiet encouragement, helping her track deliverables the others forgot to send. James, to his credit, began to step up too, gradually shifting from distant observer to uneasy ally, intercepting Victoria's more blatant attempts at undermining her authority. Still, every victory felt fragile, one misstep away from collapse. Everything came to a head during the final pitch meeting with Chen and his advisory board 2 weeks later. The conference suite buzzed with tension, journalists hovering discreetly in the corner, cameras poised to capture a milestone announcement. Maya stood at the front, palms damp but steady, her presentation translated seamlessly between English and Mandarin, weaving financial projections with cultural integration strategies. She highlighted Mandarin-speaking concierge services, curated dining experiences, and family-friendly multi-generational suites, a plan designed not just to attract Chinese travelers but to make them feel seen. Chen's board members nodded along, their expressions intent, occasionally exchanging quiet remarks Maya understood perfectly. And then Victoria struck. Just as Maya transitioned to discussing partnerships with Chinese tech platforms, Victoria interrupted smoothly, her voice calm but pointed. "Before we finalize anything," she said, rising from her seat, "I think it's only fair to question the source of some of these figures. After all, Ms. Carter's background hasn't been independently verified, and I'd hate for us to make promises we can't deliver." The room went silent. For a moment, Maya felt the old weight of invisibility pressing down again, threatening to crush her voice before it could rise. But then she heard Elena's soft inhale beside her, saw James's jaw tighten, and caught Chen's calm, steady gaze at the far end of the table. She drew a slow breath, lifted her chin, and answered firmly, in Mandarin. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice unwavering, "every figure in this presentation comes directly from Miami's Tourism Board, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and Mandarin language market reports published this quarter. You are welcome to verify them yourself. Transparency isn't optional for me. It's who I am." For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then Chen nodded once, decisively, and spoke in Mandarin to his board. He said simply, "She is credible." Victoria's face drained of color, her composure finally cracking under the weight of that single sentence. Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the moment, and Maya felt the tide shift permanently beneath her feet. When the meeting ended, Chen pulled her aside, his expression softer than she'd seen it before. "I stand by my offer," he said quietly. "Way Global would be fortunate to have you, but so would Meridian. Whatever you choose, you have earned this." Maya stared at the card in her hand again, feeling its weight differently now. She thought about the years of rejection, the late nights, the endless grind of debt and invisibility. She thought about Elena, who had believed in her when no one else did, and James, who was finally starting to see her worth. And she thought about the younger version of herself, standing outside polished doors like these, wondering if anyone would ever open them. 6 weeks later, Maya's nameplate gleamed outside her new office, Director of Global Guest Experience. From the 40th floor, Miami's turquoise waters stretched endlessly toward the horizon, sunlight catching the jade tea set on her desk beside her framed Tsinghua diploma. The Meridian's new, unseen talent program had already identified that 45% of the staff were multilingual, and 70% held untapped certifications, housekeepers, clerks, and cooks stepping forward with hidden skills the hotel had ignored for years. Elena now served as assistant manager, her laughter filling the hallways as she led new staff training sessions. James had become a vocal advocate for systemic change, spearheading mentorship programs and diversity initiatives. And Victoria Langford? She resigned quietly, transferring to a regional post far from Miami. One evening, as the sun dipped low over South Beach, Maya stood by her window, sipping jasmine tea, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She glanced down into the lobby below and noticed a young janitor lingering near the concierge desk, an engineering textbook clutched under his arm, his uniform faintly wrinkled from the day's work. For a moment, their eyes met, and she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, the kind born of shared battles and unspoken understanding. Because she saw him. She had always seen him. And now, finally, she had the power to make sure the world saw him too.